Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll take your seat, please, we're about to begin.
All right, we're going to transition into our general session number one. First thing, I really wanted to save a comment here for general session number one. Ronnie thanked me for IPD. And you can ask Matt, you can ask Jennifer. Many of you know I'm a teams person. Project teams are so critical. One, they know it. Well, they don't know it. They might not agree with me, but I'm not the smartest person in the room. I'm a team-based person. I like perspective. So, Ronnie, I'll extend your thanks to the team of industry partners and DOT staff, technical units and divisions, and FHWA as well, because IPD is where it is because of the team approach that we took and all the different brains and minds and ideas that have come with it. As a reminder, we will be using the Slido app for polling during this session. So we'll leave it up here for a quick moment if you haven't already downloaded the app. So as a part of integrated project delivery, we have thrown out an enormous amount of different products to you all. And one thing that we hear is, Chris, there's so much going on. How does all this stuff fit together? What we'd like to do today and throughout this workshop is to try to start weaving together how all of these products fit together. Am I good to go, Eugene? Thank you. Now, this is a very simple graphic that we've started to create to try to help people understand how all of these different products fit together. And we do have a vision of making this a landing page on our website as what topic do you want to talk about? What topic do you want more information about? And you click on one of these circles. And for those of that you can't see it, it's really around our core principles: scope, schedule, budget, quality, risk, and the framework, which I consider the process. What I'll tell you is these components help us understand the parts and pieces and how they all fit together to successfully deliver projects. But really the driving force as we began this session, it really comes down to the components of the team. The project team and how well they work together is a major factor in what makes or breaks the project's success. Many of you may feel like you've worked in teams a long time, and many of you may feel that you've been managing a project a long time, and you're absolutely right. But what we're trying to do is put a different spin on it. So we ask you all to have open minds as to what project management means to you, as well as open minds as to what being on a project team means. In this session, we will be focusing on project teams and how they can be high-performing. High-performing teams are critical because they execute more in less time. They make more timely decisions and higher quality decisions by functioning as a team. They work together to solve complex problems. When you're working as a team, there's less surprises that pop up because you're routinely working together. And my favorite part is it's more fun to work with a project team. Today we have Matt, Clarke, Jennifer Evans, and Brandon Jones as speakers, and they're going to discuss three different aspects of what makes teams high performing. They will discuss the importance of strong project management, the value of multidisciplinary teams, and help us all have a better understanding of what a division engineer in North Carolina DOT needs from project teams. So with that, I'd like to introduce Matt Clarke. Matt Clarke is the Deputy Director of Technical Services, and I ain't gonna lie to you, this guy's good, so keep your hands off.
Thank you, Chris. I think we're going to begin with a question through Slido. So, Eugene, if you could throw that up, I'd appreciate that. Give you a few minutes to check in on your phones. I'm not naive enough to think that you're not going to have them out the whole time, so let's just go ahead and get them out right to begin with. So our question is, what is the top reason that some projects fail? I know we have some low-hanging fruit here, but put in what you think is what you've seen most often. I'm very thankful to get a little break without the mask on, but I can promise you it's not worth it having to stand behind the podium versus sit out there. If anybody's willing to trade, we can. Our numbers approaching 200. Let's see what our responses look like. Lack of communication. Well, I think that is a common theme that you're going to hear consistently, I know, from us three today, and then even from those who are following in the second general session after us. And I think that's something we all recognize. So I appreciate your responses still coming in, but I think far and above the winner is lack of communication. I appreciate you responding to that. Transition over and make sure my clicker is working. So project management. In the next few minutes, we'll focus on project management and the best practices and activities of a project manager to hopefully guard against those items that we just saw on that screen. Our goal is to be able to reduce that risk, to be able to eliminate those as challenges to projects. We're going to highlight the role of project managers, those who are Ncdot employees, and then also those who are project managers with our private engineering firm partners. There's some many similarities, but there are some different responsibilities of each of those. And then in a similar way for project team members, whether you're DOT staff or working for a production firm. Regardless of who is signing your paycheck, you are on the project team. And if we're going to be successful, we must work together. So why do we need project management? There are many reasons. We're going to touch on a few, but ultimately the project manager leads the project team to deliver projects on budget, on schedule, and according to what the purpose and need of the project is. Project manager assembles the project team, lays out the vision, and understands the resources and expertise that are needed on the team. It's key for the project manager to take this responsibility. Also ensuring that the team members understand the goal of the project, the timing for when activities and deliverables need to be completed. And then finally, communication. Project manager needs to be focused on communicating effectively with the division engineer, with stakeholders, planning organizations, municipalities, other private property owners, those who are impacted by the project, as well as having a keen focus on fostering communication among the project team members. It is key for the project manager to promote that and to ensure that it's taking place. I do want to highlight that a project manager, nowhere in our job description is that you are not a paper pusher, you're not an email sender, and you're not a detailed plan reviewer. I know we probably had some of those activities in the past, but most often we are not communicating if we're sending emails. In the next few minutes we want to focus on this outline that you see here on the screen. You're going to hear scope, schedule, budget, quality, and risk many times today and tomorrow. That's not an accident. That's something that we need to be keenly focused on. Ncdot and the private engineering firm project manager, they work in tandem to enlist, organize, and lead the project team. The project managers are responsible for guiding the project team to accurately scope and deliver the project that meets the expected schedule as Ncdot has programmed. We have committed to that schedule as we develop the STIP, and we must meet what that schedule is. Project managers are charged with managing the budget of the project, but it cannot be a responsibility of just one individual. Project team members must be engaged and involved in this if we're going to be successful. Project manager also leads the team to ensure products are delivered to the expectations of quality. This is a responsibility of all team members, but the project manager should be overseeing that, performing that quality assurance over the whole team, ensuring that what we're providing is of good value to the taxpayers in North Carolina. Project manager works closely with team members to identify risks to the scope, schedule, and budget, monitors and strives to close or mitigate risk. This proactive approach will identify hurdles before we reach them. That's a key goal. And finally, the Ncdot project manager should be interacting closely with the division engineer and others to communicate the status of the project. Organizing and coordinating teams. Even prior to a project being scoped, the project manager needs to step back, take the time to understand the challenges of the project, understand the resources and expertise that are needed on the project team. The project manager should be reviewing the express design, the project scoping report for those STIP projects, and even pulling in Ncdot subject matter experts to understand what the project team makeup should look like. It could be that a project manager pulls in a qualified GESC firm to identify what the needs for the project are. That's key. Before we set sail, we need to be able to chart a course as project managers. Throughout the project development process, the project manager pulls team members together in regular meetings to solve challenges, share information, and ensure that everyone is on the same page and that we're focused on deliverables that are upcoming. These team meetings are led by the project manager, but it's been a challenge. I know that many of us are on many project teams, especially those who are team design leads. You can't be at every project team meeting. It's just not possible. And it's not necessary either. We need to prioritize, but we also need to recognize that based on the stage of the project, your involvement may not be as key as it is at other times. Again, hitting on communication. Division engineer shared with me just a couple of weeks ago that he felt that 85% of the challenges that we experience could be solved with better communication. I think many of us would agree with that. We see it in the responses that you provided. Communicate the vision, goals, and expectations to the team member. That's what the project manager is doing. The project manager is maintaining open lines of communication with the division engineer or his or her representative. Clearly communicating with stakeholders, municipalities, planning organizations, with the support of the division engineer. And one, if I have a soapbox, this is one for me. One that's keenly important to me is that the project manager must stay engaged during the right-of-way acquisition and utility relocation timeframe. It is not enough to issue final right-of-way plans and think that you can take a break for a couple of years until we approach turn-in for plans. But the project manager must stay engaged with right-of-way agents, ensuring that we're focusing on priority parcels and providing those parcels and making them available so that utility relocations can begin at the appropriate time. Project managers, you are responsible for delivering the project on schedule, and your engagement during this phase is paramount. Project scoping. We as project managers, we bring clarity to the project team through a well-defined scope. And as we begin projects, we may not have full clarity. It's not, we can't ideally say that we know exactly what we're going to need to deliver on day one. But we begin with what the information we have is, and we refine that as we continue on. We need to identify the activities and deliverables necessary with the help of our project team members. I'm hopeful that the interactive PDN is providing another tool, another resource to you to help with this. If activities are not necessary that are identified in the PDN, we don't need to scope them. We need to remove those from the template in the MS project schedule. We cannot forget about stakeholder input. Once alignment is achieved with the division engineers, with the stakeholders, then we need to document that. I've fallen prey before, some others of you may have as well, but my memory gets very bad years into the future once decisions have been made. So we need to be documenting what those decisions are, because it is likely that we'll have to pull them back out in the future and show how stakeholders have been engaged in the decisions that have been made. And we all recognize that change does happen. As we identify changes to the scope, we need to be flexible. We need to pivot. We need to plan for what adjustments we need to make to the project team. And it is key that we be flexible as a group. A schedule is key in helping visualize the deliverables and how the deliverables from one discipline affect the work being completed by another discipline. A detailed schedule is a tool that a project manager uses to communicate with the project team, and a tool that provides awareness to all team members. It is paramount that we have a up-to-date and a project schedule that is of sufficient detail to be able to make decisions. The production firm should be developing the MS project schedule. Should be specific to the project and have the necessary level of detail that's needed. Each project schedule is not going to look the same. A schedule for a low-impact bridge replacement is going to look much different than a U project in the STIP. So we need to be mindful of that, understanding that the schedule is a tool. We shouldn't feel like we're chained down by the schedule, but it's a tool that we're using. If unforeseen challenges arise, the PM uses the schedule to quickly quantify the impacts. Reviewing the schedule is a key piece as we transition. At times, it's challenging to know exactly where you are in a project. There are many activities underway. Deliverables are being submitted, being reviewed. Property owners are calling and responding to public records requests. You feel like you're just being dumped on with so many things. There are so many things that you as a project manager may be working on that you could easily lose track of the high-level viewpoint of the project. That's a dangerous place to be. We as project managers, we do dive into the details at times, but we cannot live there or our project is going to suffer. We need to pull ourselves back up. In a similar way, a schedule acts like an instrument panel for a pilot who's flying through cloudy skies. You can't see the ground. You don't have the same awareness as you typically would when things get complicated. But the project manager needs to pull back up, reset by reviewing the schedule, and flying back up to the correct altitude. The project manager needs to be reviewing the schedule every week, understanding what's upcoming, what deliverables are going to be turned in the next couple of weeks. Need to be looking out at 2 months to understand which deliverables are in the process of being developed, making sure team members are aware, and then an even farther look out at 6 months to understand, okay, which activities do we need to begin in the next few weeks to be able to keep this project on schedule. If the project manager sees opportunities to remove disciplines from the critical path, the project manager and the project team members need to be working together to do so. That's a risk mitigation strategy. Just as we discussed in scope, unplanned events occur, and they have the potential to impact our schedule. But as project managers, we should be striving to make adjustments to maintain what the major milestone dates are, and certainly maintain the let date. I want to begin, as we talk about budget, I want to focus on 2 items. First, looking at the overall project budget, I want to first thank each of you. I know that the last 8 months, you have looked at many cost estimates. You have verified many cost estimates for many projects, and I thank you for that. I know that it's something that was unplanned in the summer of last year, but it is key for Ncdot being able to provide a STIP that is fiscally constrained and something that we can confidently deliver. So thank you for the efforts in that. We as project managers and project team members must deliver projects within the programmed amount. It's been mentioned a couple times already, considering the right-of-way, utilities, and construction costs. Inflation is something that we're hearing much of today. It's something that we cannot control. But what we can control is the cost of our projects, that we're providing the project that meets the purpose and need and nothing more. We need to be containing costs whenever we can. Also, I want to thank each of you who assist with projections on a monthly basis on these annual projects that we have. I know that for our consultant partners, it may be something that you don't see the results of, but just to give you a sense, our PE spend plan, we're within 1% of what we had projected to spend throughout this year. That's a testament to what everybody's done. So thank you. I wish I could project the expenses of my household incomes that close sometimes within 1%. That's pretty good. But thank you for the work that you've done, and thank you for those NCDOT staff and technical units that assist in that as well. And finally, I want to mention for NCDOT project managers, we must be aware of the funding that's available on our WBSs. We need to prevent projects from going into overdraft. We need to be making sure that we're requesting funds at the appropriate time. So I know that's something that DOT project manager we're going to hear more of in the next few months. Transitioning to schedule, I mentioned it before, but ultimately we are stewards of taxpayer dollars, and we must have a focus on providing high-quality products that allow the construction industry to build and deliver the infrastructure improvements as planned and designed. We have many customers. I think we could probably develop a list that's several pages long of all the customers that we have as providers in this room. The public, stakeholders, construction staff, contractors, maintenance and operations staff. And as we successfully do our job better, it's going to make their lives much easier. So that's a focus, and it begins with quality. We need to provide quality products that limit rework, redesign, limit impacts to the schedule. Ultimately, construction revisions are very costly in a time perspective and in a cost perspective. That a dollar spent in pre-construction could save tenfold, hundredfold. It could be even more than that savings in the construction phase. So we need to make sure that we're thinking about things with a multidisciplinary approach and making sure that what we're doing makes sense from a general overall view of the project. Mr. Stephen Morgan is going to share more on quality in the next session. Oftentimes, project managers find themselves fighting fires each and every day. Some of this is inherent to the job. It's just part of the responsibility. But I believe that better management of risk will reduce the number of fires that we need to fight and allow a project manager to be more proactive. You'll notice that I'm not saying risk elimination. It's just not possible. If we eliminate all the risks that exist on a project, we'll be letting projects 10 years later than what we plan to. So we cannot completely eliminate risk, but we can manage it. We need to look ahead with the support of project team members, review the schedule, keeping a pulse on public and stakeholder input, as these are key in identifying risk. It's not enough to identify these risks, but we need to document and mitigate them. Jennifer Evans and Wanda Austin will be sharing more information with us on best practices of managing risk. And I would like to introduce a concept to you. You can look at risk as one side of a coin, where the other side is opportunity. So, risk is not a bad thing, but as we can capitalize on it, we can move projects, we can advance them quicker by managing risk versus eliminating risk. Project manager must engage with project team members to contain cost and to keep projects on schedule as we have risk that do develop. Finally, monitoring and reporting progress. We've touched on the importance of sharing information with a division engineer. And Brandon Jones, he's going to share in more detail with us what that looks like from his perspective. The project manager must communicate the level of detail that the division engineer needs at the frequency that he or she needs. I recognize that this is different for each project. Too many details can dilute the message that you're sharing. That's important to see, and I think that Brandon's going to have some more information as to what he needs in terms of updates from a division engineer's perspective. The executive status report is shown here. This is a sample document that's available to project managers. It was developed as the project management guide was developed. Please take a look at this. Use it and understand what your division engineer needs for your project. When decisions need to be made, the project manager must ensure that the proper subject matter experts are involved in recommendations and decision making. We cannot be making decisions in a vacuum without understanding what the implications could be to other disciplines, to other groups that have completed design. We need to be working together. Project team members need to be prepared with recommendations and ready to make decisions at team meetings. while managing the scope, schedule, budget, quality, and risk of a project sounds pretty straightforward. If you told me I only had to worry about 5 things in my life, like, I'm on board, let's go. But it is not easy. We all recognize that. We're managing complex and costly projects that directly impact hundreds of private property owners and businesses, and indirectly thousands of users. These are very impactful for the communities that we live in. I thank you for having hard conversations that you have on a daily basis, for pushing your teams to deliver, and for being the champion of your projects. It is key that we continue doing so. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach for each project. I'm hopeful that the enhancements that are being made with the PDN, with the project management guide, that are beneficial to you. If they're not, if you see things that could be done in a different way, we need that feedback. We're not putting something out that's gold-plated that we know is 100%, but it will only improve with the feedback that you provide to us. And I'm going to conclude with one last plug for the project management guide. This tool was developed to help project managers, both internally and externally, lead teams from project initiation through letting. It is not prescriptive, but it does highlight the principles and best practices that will help you be successful as a project manager. Some of which are collaborating efficiently, streamlining communication, proactively managing project schedules and budget, and ways to increase accountability. It's a roadmap that's heavily focused on communication. As you see, many of the activities that are identified are meetings and interactions that the project manager is leading or co-leading with others. A few things that are being worked on now, technical services, we're working closely with the project management leadership team to understand what training they feel would be helpful for project managers across the state. We're doing some investigation in that. And then I'd also like to see an appendix developed to the project management guide, which will highlight some of those more specific items that we encounter in projects. Every project wouldn't have them, but those ones that we may encounter that would help us provide detailed information. An example could be different type of permits that we experience in different projects. So I thank you for the time that you provided to me. I think we are going to transition to another Slido question. And as you answer that, I'd like to introduce Ms. Jennifer Evans. She's going to be continuing this portion of this session. So thank you all.
I'll give you guys a few minutes to, a few seconds to get your answers in. And remember this question because we'll come back to it in the presentation, talk about it a bit. Let's switch it on over and see what kind of response we've gotten. I think it's going to be very clear. That was the intention of this question. All right, thank you. Thank you all for participating in the poll. And we'll get started. So for my presentation, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into similar topics that Matt talked about at a little bit lower level about the tools and how project managers can use them to facilitate communication and build well-working teams. And so I wanted to just address the elephant in the room, which is probably that most of us did not go into this field to be communicators and to talk. And so that's a challenge. And I myself did not. So for those of you who don't know me well, I've been in DOT about 20-some years. I've spent most of my time in central and eastern regions, but I'm actually from Murphy, from Division 14. And my dad is a psychologist, and so I'm a shrink's kid. And my folks did not believe in corporal punishment. So when I got in trouble, which was a lot. I had to go to my room and I had to reflect on my actions and how they negatively affected the family. And then when I was ready, I had to come out and talk about it. And I hated that punishment. And so I spent most of my childhood going, I can't hear you, I'm not listening, or just begging them to just spank me and get it over with. So here I am, talking to you about communication. And I wouldn't have done this if I didn't think it was important. So it's just absolutely critical. And as a project manager, I have to have a good team because there's no way I can know everything. These projects are complex, so we really rely on our teams. So to dive deeper, we're going to talk about the makeup of the project team, communication and common goals, and then talk about some of the tools that project managers can use to stay on scope, time and budget, tackle tough conversations, and then ultimately the hope is to build trust. And I want to recognize that I know all of you are not project managers in this room, so you contribute to a team in some way, and so try to open your mind to whatever your role is in a project team, how you can be better in your team communication so we can grow these highly performing teams. So teams are kind of like families, and we're made up of family members, and sometimes you get to pick them and sometimes you don't. And your team family, your work family will vary with projects, and as your projects progress into right-of-way and utilities, you may add new team members, but it's important to keep your key team members plugged in throughout the life of your project, and keep your team focused on working toward that common goal and responsibility. So obviously we've all acknowledged team communication is not easy, may not come naturally, but I want to just talk for a minute about what it can look like if we do it correctly. So I have a quote from Nicole Hackler, who works on my team, that I thought summed it up perfectly. And she said, "Since being involved in a multidisciplinary approach, I have a better understanding of all aspects of my projects. With a multidisciplinary team talking together, it is much easier to see the overarching problems that one issue may cause and the domino effects that result. We were so siloed before that we were unable to see the forest for the trees. As a project manager, I am becoming more aware of problems that may arise ahead of time, which is key. And I can see now not just a linear progression of A and B and C, but how projects better work in tandem. And then you can think, well, if A and not B, then what about C? It is a different type of thinking that minimizes the number of surprises. And because I am more invested, my projects are better for it, and I'm more excited to see them through." So for those of you who aren't Shrink's kids and may not have as much experience as me, let's dig a little deeper into communication and how we communicate. And good communication should always flow both ways. And while oftentimes the project manager may lead the discussion, they rely heavily on those technical team members to bring forward information that's important for the group. Teams should be open to working together and providing information, and also open in how they receive information. Be confident enough to ask hard questions. And as demonstrated in our Slido question, sometimes when you get a status, it's a response that might sound good enough, but may not actually really give you the information you're looking for. So asking a probing follow-up question is a good way to really figure out if things are truly on track or not. And on the flip side, if you're giving an update in a status meeting, provide more than just "we're working on it." Make it meaningful when you communicate. Work to find a style that's comfortable, and then ask for feedback. Is this working? Can we make adjustments to our meetings to be more effective? And always constantly strive to try to improve. So the where of communication and ways we have communicated have changed drastically in the past few years. I mean, we've spent more time on Teams meetings than I think any of us would ever imagine. And it's important to remember that face-to-face interactions do exist, and they are very beneficial and sometimes the best method of communication. A survey by Adobe found people in the workplace spent an average on 3.1 hours per day sending and checking emails alone, and amounting to 15.5 hours per week and a shocking 20 full weeks of the year. So that's something to think about. Team members should work to avoid email when information is complicated, important, sensitive in nature, urgent response is required, or a lot of back and forth is necessary. Sometimes we get in these email chains and they just go and go and go, and at some point you need to just stop and pick up the telephone or call a meeting. Emails are effective to send general notices, to summarize conversations, those type of things. So they are a good tool, but just be selective about when you use them. And one of the things my project managers we've worked on is using our agendas for our status meetings to try to keep a running list of items that aren't urgent, to reduce email, save those topics for our meetings. And using simple ground rules when you email, like consistently using your to and your CC to indicate who needs to respond versus who's for information. Simple things like that are easy and will make your communication better. And it's always important to remember that what we communicate is so critical. So set and speak clear priorities and goals as a team. Make sure assignments and action items and deadlines are clear. Remember that your project manager is not the expert and cannot possibly know everything. And when you share information on issues or problems, come with a strategy or a potential solution. I think that's so key. So I have a section here you can see don't assume, and I have struggled on what to talk about on don't assume. And originally I was just the cliche, we all know what it means, and tell a story about one time when I assumed, and that was just bothering me. And then I decided, well, I wanted to talk about don't assume that someone else is going to finish your job for you. Or, we talked a little bit about people getting their boots dirty or getting out on the front line, and don't assume that the next person down the line is going to fix something that we haven't done correctly in pre-construction. But that still bothered me. And so yesterday I Googled assume, and it actually has two definitions. And so the assume we all know is supposed to be the case without proof. We know what it does. The second definition is take or begin to have, as in power or responsibility. And so I'm going to flip don't assume to don't assume and absolutely assume. Assume the ownership for your portion. Assume that power and responsibility. So with all that in mind, I hope that we can all agree that good communication is a key as we work to deliver our projects. And so we're going to expand just a little bit more in the next few slides on some of the tools that we can use to empower our work families to better communicate and make decisions, plans of actions, so we aren't just, like managing the project. So as Matt talked about, scope is one of our primary goals, to stay on scope, establish a good scope, and keep our teams focused on that scope. There are several tools that are available for project managers to use when we talk about scope. There's a standard scope of services template. Now you can see that's coming soon. That's going to be developed to align the PDN with scopes for engineering services. Hopefully that'll provide some consistency and clarity. The project scoping report, which I think Matt also mentioned, is a good tool that I think we've all heard a lot about at the end of stage one. And the key thing on that is when a project manager gets that and your team is ready to start, do a thorough review, make sure that things are clear and accurate and that there's buy-in before you move forward. And then during stage two, the project management guide introduced an optional project definition document, or the PDD. And the PDD can be developed by the project manager in collaboration with the team, used to clearly define the scope, and you can include both what the project is and is not. And to me, I see the PDD as a beneficial tool in pulling folks back together when that scope creep conversations start. Have an assigned document that you can remind your team of the true purpose can be a very non-confrontational way to start to challenge folks and reel things back in. Project managers can also use open-ended questions to discuss scope creep, and there's a couple over there. And the biggest one that I think is, always asking, what effects will this have on other disciplines, like your right-of-way and your utility, your permits, your schedule? It has become clear to all of us, I think, that the expectation is that we deliver our projects on time. And to deliver the projects on time, the MS Project Schedule is the tool that's required for our schedules. As project managers work to view and review MS Project Schedules, there's a few guidance documents that might be helpful. You can use the MS Project Quick Reference and 6 Key Areas documents. And I should say these tools that I'm talking about are all located on the Project Manager SharePoint site, so they're available for anybody. As well as some online training that was made available, 2021 Successful Scheduling with Project. So recently our team held a group working session for a project that we were managing to try to develop a schedule as a group activity. And I was very concerned of how that was going to come together. We started with the template that was provided and kind of laid out to everybody that this was a working session and we were going to explore how activities would line up, talk about durations. And in the end, I think it was a very positive experience. We got a lot of good feedback, and I think the goal was that hopefully we established a schedule that was developed by the team that has buy-in for our team. Having that established MS Project Schedule then allows you to ask straightforward questions in your status meeting, like, our schedule says we need to be applying for permits in 3 months. What work items are outstanding so that we can have our permit in hand in time for clearing to occur in advance of utility relocation? And will the PUE parcels be available? Those are the type of details that we need to be talking about, and your schedule can guide you on asking those questions. Good gracious, that just jumped right ahead. All right, delivering on budget. Accurate estimates provide realistic costs for our budgeting purposes. And we talked a little bit about the PE projections and then our right-of-way utility and our construction estimates that have been so critical. And by working together to stay within budget, we really help to reduce the funding and scheduling uncertainty with our programs, and obviously that helps us to stabilize our program. So to help as a team, it is important to remember that you guys are responsible for assisting in developing accurate estimates, both for those PEF budgets and for our construction and right-of-way utility estimates. The project manager is responsible for monitoring those costs versus the budget and providing the verified estimates we've talked about. And we do have the new cost estimate application tool that hopefully will help with some of that paperwork. We need to be always working to ensure our funding is available. And so we have the pre-con finance guide that was developed that should be the project manager's guide, go-to guide for anything money. And then also the risk assessment worksheet is a great place to track and monitor potential events or circumstances that may impact the project costs. And you can always pull out that risk assessment worksheet at regular status meetings and review those items as a way to keep folks thinking about that. And then also if you need to add things or maybe you have something that you can actually take off. So when we think about tough conversations, I think the first thing that all of us go to is, we're addressing poor performance or we're addressing schedule issues. But if the team has worked to establish those clear roles, responsibilities, and deadlines, it becomes much easier to address those issues because you have quantifiable data to fall back on. But I wanted to talk about another kind of tough conversation, and that is when something just flat goes wrong and the team finds something has been missed. It's late in the game and you've missed something. That's a tough conversation, a different type. And I think this is when an open working team can really shine. Instead of defaulting to finger pointing and blaming, you go straight to solutions and strategies. You go straight to, yep, it happened, what can we do to fix it? And I think that's just so important. So to summarize, successful teamwork is built around open communication and trust while the team works toward a common goal. And the graphics on this are similar to Matt's. This shows the project manager in a helicopter flying high over that teamwork triangle, trying to avoid getting stuck in the weeds, staying at that higher elevation that Matt talked about. And I really think this is a very intentional and learned skill. I think it's something that's new to a lot of us, and a lot of times it helps me before I go in a meeting to think about who's in the meeting, what topics we need to discuss, and almost choose a level that I need to be at before I go in that meeting. So the last slide is about trust, and obviously that's what we need to build when we're working on a team. It's so much better to deliver with a team that has trust. And so also, I guess we need to think about trust with the public, trust with our stakeholders. And I think we're in a time we've heard a little bit of financial rebuild, and we've come out of this audit and things are looking up. And so I think we're really, as far as DOT, we're really in a trust building period now. And trying to build that culture of accountability where we say we're going to do, we say what we're going to do and we do what we say. And the thing that is so tricky about trust is it can take a really long time to build it, and it can take a very short time to break it. And so I was going to tell a funny story to close this up here. I'm going to roll us back to Murphy, to the 80s, to teenage Jennifer. And we were 8th grade, and we're at a family picnic, and several families had older teenagers there at the picnic, and they were talking about going to the bowling alley. And so they asked me if I wanted to go along to the bowling alley, and I said, yeah, let me ask my folks. And so I asked my parents. My dad gave me some money to go bowling, and we get in the car, and we ride to Murphy to go to the bowling alley. And we get to the bowling alley, and for those of you who don't know much about Murphy, it's a cruising town. I mean, big time cruising. And so we get to the bowling alley, and we switch cars, and we spend the evening cruising through downtown Murphy. And now I'm in 8th grade, and I mean, this was big. And so we went back to the bowling alley, we rode back to the picnic, and we walk up to the families, the parents sitting there. And I'm with my new friends, my new cool friends. And my mom says, well, how did it go? And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, how did you do on your bowling? And I guess I wanted to save face. I wanted to be cool. I said, don't you know nobody goes to the bowling alley to bowl? And to this day, my mother will tell you that I intentionally misled her to go cruising in 8th grade. I have never been able to convince her of that otherwise. So in closing, I would just ask each of you to embrace your role with ownership and enthusiasm as we continue to grow a culture where we promise what we are going to do and we deliver on what we promise. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brandon.
Good afternoon. I'll tell you, Matt and Jennifer, kind of hard to follow that. And I think I was sitting there jotting down in my head how to be a better division engineer when it comes to dealing with projects and projects teams, because it is a challenge. Each one of us, as being that team about delivering projects and moving this organization and this state forward in our transportation industry, it doesn't come easy, and we all know that. So thank y'all for what you put into those slides. I don't have that much to add, but I will say from a division engineer perspective, I want to take a few minutes to talk about, as you've heard, what was the number one thing that we need to work on between project teams and divisions? Communication's it, right? If you have poor communication or a breakdown somewhere in there, you're going to miss something. You're not going to recognize a risk that needs to be addressed. You're not going to foreshadows something that's coming up in the project's future that needs to be addressed now that a division engineer can help out, work through with our other partners. So provide solutions. We talked about it, Matt and Jennifer both touched on this, but always look at the solutions, not the problem. Focus on what will give results. So as a division engineer, we've got enough problems. Don't bring more problems to us. Bring us solutions. Bring us the whys to those solutions. Bring us other options. Let us have a menu to look at. We're going to ask questions as to what would be the best approach. We're going to rely on your technical expertise. You're talking about multidisciplinary teams. You know, most division engineers are not experts in this field. We might be, good knowledge of maintenance and operations or good knowledge of construction. Some have a blend of both. Some have a little bit of background in project development. But we're relying on the project team's expertise to bring us solutions, to let us weigh those solutions into what is the best solution to move forward in a certain project. Keep the project and process moving forward. The project manager and the project team have to drive each segment. Matt mentioned, it doesn't stop when you get through the environmental document, when you get to the design, when you get to the point of utility relocations and coordination, when you get to the point of right-of-way. As a project manager, it doesn't stop there. And I will say it doesn't stop through construction, right? There's things that come up in construction that we need that project manager design team's input on. We have to have revisions. I don't know there's been a project that we've built that hasn't had some type of a revision. Be proactive, not reactive. We don't want surprises. Nobody wants those. Think into the future. Ronnie mentioned something I'm glad he did. We need to make sure we're bringing the construction and constructability, but also the long-term maintenance view when we build projects and design projects. That's very important. Think about how we're going to maintain this. Does this create issues for our maintenance forces? Does it create issues just like the last couple of weekends when we're trying to remove snow and ice from roadways? Sometimes we don't think about those things when we're designing projects. But think about those things early. If you're widening a corridor and there's a good chance that there's going to be septic systems impacted on that corridor, you probably need to do the research on the septic systems up front instead of a little bit later before you start looking at alternate alignments. Be available. Communicate with us. Communicate with internal and external partners. Build those relationships, and it takes that to deliver our projects. Ensure messaging is clear and unified. If division engineers have a great example of a format of what they'd like to see, I can guarantee you every division engineer has different likes, different preferences. We're not all the same by any means. Y'all know that. You've worked with enough of us. So talk to that division engineer, talk to that division team on what type of frequency they would like to have, what type of format of communication, format of reports, information that helps them make sure that they can keep local partners updated on the project progress. Be transparent about the top risk. Like Matt mentioned, we can't be void of risk. We don't need to be void of risk. We wouldn't have a successful project in any type of timeline if we did so. We have to be headstrong with what risks are, and then talk about those up front, how they would impact scopes, how they would impact the project schedule, budget, and commitments. We need to do the right things for the projects, but we need to weigh the risk of making those decisions about the projects. Bring us as division engineers and the division team in early on the decision-making process. And finally, be adaptable. The only thing that's constant is change. It will change. Therefore, being able to adapt is essential to being successful. There's no other way around it. Project timelines and schedules probably last a lot longer than most division engineers, if you think about it, and maybe even a lot of project managers. So a lot of times you're coming into projects midway or toward the tail end. like Jennifer mentioned, don't assume that that division engineer is up to speed on the project when they're new. I'm a good example of that. I was in Division 8 for about 5.5 years, came back to Division 5 about 10 months ago, and getting caught up on projects here has been a challenge. I won't lie to you, it's been a huge challenge, but I've relied on our great project managers we have on our projects to provide that communication, updates, where we stand, and to help guide our division team in decisions that have to be made about projects. Teams should function so well that an outsider does not know if they are division managed, central managed, or working as a consultant team member. It's DOT, that's how they view it. And then remember, project delivery is primary. We must deliver according to our commitments as to taxpayers and stakeholders as programmed in the STIP. I told you it was going to be short and sweet. Matt and Jennifer covered a lot of the primary parts of the topics, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. I want to take a quick moment and thank Brandon. If you look at the agenda, Joey Hopkins is on the agenda for the last session. Joey was unable to be here with us today. Brandon, being experienced as he is, he was able to jump in and help us understand what division engineers need out of our project managers and our teams. So, Brandon, thank you.
No problem.
Couple quick things. They touched on a lot of things, and a lot of you are probably nodding your head, just, yes, we know that, yes, we know that. But there's a lot of people that haven't managed projects the way we're looking to manage projects. So I hope that you take that. We're trying to calibrate and bring everybody up to the same level of what our expectations are for project managers and high-functioning multidisciplinary teams. The other thing is, project management is not for everyone. It's a challenge. Every day is different. Every day you're dealing with a different discipline. Every day you're dealing with a different issue. I personally think that's fun. I enjoy the diversity of it. But I understand that some people don't. So, you really need to know that project management is not for the faint of heart. But the upsides of being a project manager is enormous. You get to understand so much about what happens in the Department of Transportation all across the board, from STIP into letting. It's an enormous opportunity to learn so much. And I personally feel project managers are future leaders of either the DOT or our industry partner firms. It's a functional discipline. Matt alluded to the fact that we're talking about project management training. We're going to be working on a curriculum for project management training. There's a lot to cover with project management: contracts, legislation, conflict resolution, team building, just to name a few. So we're going to be working on a curriculum to help our industry partners as well as our staffs understand how to be highly effective project management. Let's go to, we're going to go back to Slido. And this is where we're going to open it up for general questions. And I hope you've been thinking about questions for our panel. And if we can't answer it today, we do intend to take notes on, depending upon time. If we can answer them all, we will. If not, we'll take notes and we'll respond back to you on the project management website, which will also have a lot of the videos from our sessions. So Terry and Eugene going to help me out, try to filter the questions. We want to make sure they're positive. They're positive, right? And what do you got, Terry?
All right, our first question is, when is the PM training?
Question number 2. To be determined, right?
The next question is, can we have all the slides to this very good presentation from this afternoon, please?
Thank you for the very good presentation part. Yes, all of our information will be available on our website. If you don't know this already, we are recording all of our sessions. You know why? Because we had a capacity, And two, tomorrow, we're going to have competing sessions, and we want you to be able to see all the sessions. So our videos, our materials, Q&A is going to be up on our website for all of you as well as your partners that didn't get to come to see the information.
What is the time frame for the standardized scopes?
It's just about there. It's just about there. Give me a month or two. Remember now, our goal was to create standardized scopes so y'all didn't have to write your own scopes. There's a lot of them, so we're buttoning them up, and we'll try to give you a time frame in the next IPD newsletter. Great question.
Okay, next question. How can a project manager manage schedule as the PEFs are in the process of updating it to the PDN?
Well, I'd work with the one I've got until I've got a new one. You know, that transition to the PDN, you know, the project manager we've provided guidance on the transition to the PDN and the stages. That means you have the ability to say, you know what, we got too much stuff going on right now, this week, this month. We're going to get to this point and we're going to transition to PDN. At that point is when we're going to update the schedule. So every project manager's got to gauge where their product is and what the risk is, and delay that transition a month or two if they have to get to a good point to make that transition. Good question.
Okay, and this one may be, oops, I just lost it.
Somebody upvoted it.
All right, y'all. I'm going to start deflecting some of these.
Okay, there it is. Thank you. This may be good for Jennifer and for Matt as a project manager in his old work days. Before you are going by the title as a project manager, what skills should you be developing?
Glad you guys got this one.
I'll start and allow Jennifer to pull in the good details like she did in the presentation. My background's in structures. If there's ever a difficult place to transition from, you're at the very end, and then you have to go and learn everything else. I know there's others of you that have backgrounds in structures. I think what was helpful for me is understanding the level of detail that was necessary for structure design, but then also recognizing that project managers, they're never going to have that awareness of that detail, nor do they need it. They're relying on that structural engineer, on that structure team lead to be able to support them as a member of the team. I think understanding the backgrounds that we all do come from, I think other things that are beneficial is to educate ourselves on how the work products from other disciplines affect what is taking place. Each of us, we're never going to be experts in all things, but understand how the pieces come together. I won't mention the name, but I spoke with someone who was a long-term DOT employee. I think it was in December. And this person was sharing with me that was very thankful for the project delivery network in that we finally have things documented. And so we have a tool, those of us who are active in pre-construction now, that didn't exist a few years ago. A lot of knowledge was in the subject matter experts' heads. But now with the project delivery network, I'm hopeful that we're putting that out there, and so that we can understand what our other team members are doing as we're developing projects.
I don't know that I have anything to add except maybe a good sense of humor and a positive outlook.
The only thing that I would add is, project managers just don't apparate. Is that a Harry Potter word, apparate? Project managers typically come from a technical discipline. I became a project manager because I'm like, if I look at synchro again, I've done it for 12 months, I'm just going to go bonkers. And then I found out, I got to do roadway and I got to do hydraulics, and I came from a technical background to a project manager. But the part that I would say, to build off of what Matt's very great answer is, know what your discipline is and the adjacent disciplines and try to keep working your way outwards. The more you know about how all of these parts and pieces fit in, the better off you're going to be. And I think the Project Delivery Network, in my mind, is a good way to show everybody all the different disciplines that may be involved from beginning to end. Now, don't read it from page 1 to 300 and whatever it is. You're not going to get the value out of it. But as you're going through stages, if you want to learn more about it, click through all the different utilities or discipline boxes and read what goes on inside of that stage. Is a great way to start understanding the multidiscipline interactions in that particular stage.
All right, this is a popular one. Has Ncdot considered creating a pre-qualification for consultant project managers, primarily those functioning in a GEC capacity?
Matt, I don't know that we've actually moved on it, but we thought about it. It's come to our mind, but do you have anything to add to that?
I'll let you take it.
Yeah, we've thought about it, but we haven't moved on it. We haven't, pre-qualifications is something that we do want to tackle, but, that's a little bit down the road. We've really been focusing on the core products that we feel like you all need to be successful in delivering the program. And it's focused around scope, schedule, budget, quality, risk, and process or framework. That's been our focus, but it may be something that we pursue going forward. Great question.
Another popular question, do you plan to create MS project templates for various types of projects?
You want to take that one, Matt?
I can. We've received some similar questions or feedback. I know those of us in technical services, we've been visiting some of the divisions, and this type of question and also a slightly different one related to the PDN has been shared. Is something we've briefly touched on. I think our first goal is to understand what training is necessary for DOT staff and for consultant partners on the MS project schedule that we have now before we launch into different templates for different type of projects. So, that training, we're hearing that pretty consistently, that we need to get up to speed as an industry, DOT and consultants, in understanding the benefits of the schedule. And I think from there, then we'd explore how do we need to expand it for different types of projects.
That's great points, Matt. We've talked about MS project schedule. Katrina's down here. We talked about putting samples up for different projects. And I could go with samples, but I'm very reluctant to provide templates that are very specific, because the most critical part of an MS project is the team getting together to connect the predecessors and successors. That's not something that can be included in a template, in my mind. Each project is different, and having a critical eye by the project team looking at those predecessors and successors is very important. So we've been reluctant, but it's not to say, based upon popular demand, we might want to consider looking at that as we go forward. But we're focusing on training and education as our primary focus at this time. Y'all are doing a great job of asking a bunch of questions. Maybe
there's a lot
anonymous
of
is the
good
way to
questions.
go.
All right, the next one, scope creep has been mentioned a lot. Can you define it? Does it include features a resource agency may bring up?
I think scope creep could cover a lot of different things. Hey, can we look at this other alternative? Or hey, can we look at, I know we've already looked at 3 interchange configurations, let's look at 2 more. What are we trying to achieve? Because scope creep can occur in the sense of design, analysis, field work, and so we need to have very good reasons for why we actually want to go do that. I know there's a lot of division engineers in here. Scope creep might be, hey, there's a pipe quarter mile down the road. Let's just extend this project quarter mile down the road and get this pipe replaced. I don't think I'm off base in saying that. Scope creep could be, well, let's go ahead and do this while we're here, because we never know when we're going to come back. Got any other examples of scope creep you all want to share? I love you, Brandon. I love you, buddy. Anybody else want to share any? What was the rest of that question, Terry? Resource agencies.
Yes.
So we're here today to talk about where we are trying to go as a DOT. And you all are the ones that deliver the projects. I haven't delivered a project in well over 5 years. You all are the ones that deliver the projects. Sharing with you what the department is looking for you to assist us with is the first step. And we are going to have to start having conversations with our stakeholders and with our partners and our resource agencies on what do we need to do and why do we need to do it. And the wants versus need conversation needs to be something that we all are talking about. I still haven't bought that compound miter saw because my wife said, you don't have any active projects, so that's just a want. We need to help them understand what our challenges are and what we're trying to deal with, and have them work with us to try to find solutions that will address their concerns, that we're also maintaining the overall schedule and the budget of the project. So we need to pull our partners in and start sharing this conversation with them. I want to ask John what he has to say, but I won't put you on the spot. I won't put you on the spot, but if you're willing.
I think this is a great topic because one of the things we're focused on is asking our resource agencies to be better engaged and participate in the scoping. Many of you are frustrated when you get to 90% plans and people want you to change things. We are too at Federal Highways. So one of the things we're trying to do is work with folks in pre-screening, really create tools to identify that conflict between the agency resource and our project early on, so that we can prevent what I would call scope creep. And the other thing we're trying to do as we update some of our partner documents is invoke this concept of project management with them. Come to the table, as Jennifer says, with solutions. Don't come to the table with problems. We're trying to encourage them to be part of the active team. And so this is what, it's not an easy road as project management, as many have talked about it, but it's something that we're trying to work on with Ncdot and our partners to really advance, because quality does take teamwork from all parties.
Thank you, John. He's a partner right there. I'd like to think that I've been working with him long enough that I could read his head nods and his body language that he did want to jump in, so thank you, John. Terry.
All right. This question, there's been quite a few variations of it, so I feel we need to get it out there. Will there be a IPD kitchen sink fee estimation to go with the updated standardized scopes?
Yes. We are working on it. It won't be the solution that you all would love to have right now, but we are making enhancements to the current kitchen sink. And we will be engaging with IT to look for more sophisticated solutions as we go forward.
All right, question. We're in the middle of a project. Does it have to follow the PDN?
Anybody else want to take that? You're the panel. I'm just the moderator.
I'll start. So rewinding 2 years ago when I was managing projects in Division 4, I kind of took the stance that if we were approaching final right-of-way plans, I did not think I was going to look very closely to determine, do I need to transition this project? Most of the design work had been completed. If we're in the middle of planning, if we're somewhere in the middle of stage 2, we haven't yet signed the environmental document, we need to think harder, and there needs to be really good justification if you do not transition a project. That's kind of the approach. I don't think there's any specific answer that we could provide that would nail it down for all projects, but I think looking at the different stages, if you're completed with stage 2, if you're getting close to the end of stage 3, I don't know if there's as much value to transition that project as there is for one that's earlier in development.
I think this is where we would yield to the project manager's expertise. And that you might notice we don't say yes or no, right? Because every project's different. So we try to be flexible and allow the project manager to make that decision. Terry, do we have time for one last one before we cut these folks loose?
Yeah, let's do this one because this one has a lot of thumbs up. Is there any documentation to show how the old project processes, for example, roadway plan stages, align with the IPD/PDN?
Anybody from the panel? I don't know. I think Tasha's here. I think Derek's here. I don't know that we've documented the process before. If you remember, before the PDN came out, we documented the process that we had. And then we developed the PDN. But I don't think we ever made connections between the old and the new. I don't know that we saw the necessity to do so. I do know that there's been a lot of confusion over the names of the stages and we used to have 8 submittals and now we have 3, which is really our 30, 60, 90. I think there's been a lot of confusion about that. Might be something for us to tackle and see if there's a way to make some cross connections there. So that's a good question. We'll take it back to the IPD leadership team and see if we need to make some cross connection there. Okay, Eugene, can you do me a favor? Can you go back to the beginning slide of this session? Before I let you go, there will be snacks. There will be snacks. Terry, is it over in the unit room? Over in the unit room, diagonally, where the units have their tables set up. Thank you, Eugene. All right. I made an audible by not talking about this slide during the presentation for timing purposes. This is a variation of the original. This is simple, easy to follow. These are just some of the major work products that have been created in these categories. And Eugene, I'd like to leave this up during the session so people can take a look at it and to see where all these different products fit within the different buckets. With that, the next session will start in this room at 4 p.m. and we will be starting sharp. So go communicate, network, and collaborate, and we'll see you in a half an hour.